The prelude, Look for the Silver Lining, by Jerome Kern.
Welcome to this worship service of the Baja for the communities that make up the 4 Unitarian Universalist congregations in Southern Arizona. So for those of you who don't know, I am Reverend Bethany Russell Lowe, and I have the great pleasure of serving the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tucson.
I'm Reverend Matthew Funk Crary, and I serve our congregation Borderlands UU in Amado.
I'm the Reverend Samantha Wilson, and I serve as interim minister at Mountain Vista Unitarian Universalist congregation.
I'm the Reverend Tina Squire, and I serve Sky Island Unitarian Universalist Church in Sierra Vista, Arizona.
I'm Shakayla Wanyama, and I'm the choir director at Mountain Vista Unitarian Universalist congregation.
And I'm Brian Moon, the music director at the UU Church of Tucson.
Though our congregation's cultures and histories may differ, we are all Unitarian Universalists. This is our big tent, Unitarian Universalism. And though our grounds and buildings may differ, we all live in and around the Sonoran Desert, a diverse and resilient landscape. This is our big tent, the Sonoran Desert. We are offering this collaborative worship experience in this time to remind ourselves of the possibilities that are emerging from this moment. The things that become possible when we move toward one another, even though we cannot physically interact. The possibilities to tap into our own wells of resilience, just as so much swirls around us. So come to this well of resilience and possibility in a time of disruption and canceling. Come to this well of community and connection in this time of physical distancing and limiting exposure. Come to this well of hope and possibility and promise in this time of uncertainty and anxiety. Come to this well. It has always been here for you, and it will be here for you for all the days of your life. We are a people who love beyond belief. We are a people who say no one is expendable. We are a people who trust science. We are a people who gather because of, not despite, our differences. In that spirit, come, let us worship together. And if you have a chalice or a candle nearby, I invite you to light it at this time, as all worship leaders are doing on their own screens now, as I read these chalice lighting words from Reverend Leslie Takahashi. All that we have ever been and all that we have ever loved stands with us on the brink of all that we aspire to create. A deeper peace, a larger love, a more embracing hope, a deeper joy in this life we share.
And now, if you will, join me in singing. Nice deep breath, spirit of life. Words will be on your screen. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. And now in Spanish. Fuente de amor, ven hacia mí, y al corazón cántale tu compasión. Sopla al volar, suben la mar, hasta moldear la justicia de la vida. Arraigame, libérame, fuente de amor, ven a mí, ven a mí.
So as we gather together as a larger community each week, we gather in word and song and ritual to hold so many different experiences and spaces that each of us are in, and a ritual that can hold us being in so many different spaces. And it reminds me, for me, these weeks of how it felt when I was younger and I was a middle school student who would really crush hard on people, and a particular crush who became a middle school sweetheart, pining over jazz band and pining over school dances until we got to be together, and then until we weren't anymore. Because as it is in middle school, we broke up, as you do, and my childhood heart that had so loved this person had crumbled. And I don't know if you remember your first time loving and leaving. Exhausting. It is exhausting to love a person or a world so deeply and to wake up and have it changed. Now, what I also remember is my mom and her method for healing a wounded, tender heart. And her medicines were twofold. Medicine number one was the drawing of a deliciously warm bubble bath in the huge adult bathtub in her room. And medicine number 2 was the sound of this little glass that I would have of the 2% milk being poured and the Hershey's syrup being squeezed and the spoon clinking against the sides of the glass, just as the chocolate milk would make its way over to where I lay in a bathtub. Now, what I appreciate most about my mom and the lesson she taught me in that moment was there was nothing small about my loving. There was nothing puppyish about it. There was nothing to be embarrassed or to cast aside about its minuscule being in the world. No, my love and the love I had for the world and other people was always taken seriously. It was worth noticing and attending to. Now, as I got older, of course, the medicine changed. And by undergrad, when I'd come home and I'd crumble into a pile on the floor, heartbroken again, as we will be, it shifted from chocolate milk to wine and from a bubble bath to some Tylenol PM, and the promise that I sleep, that I'd be safe, and that in the morning I would be fed and I would be listened to. Now that is what a heart aches for when it is breaking. And I know that we also tell ourselves when we break up with someone that surely there's a reason, surely things are better on the horizon, surely there is hope that was not possible had you stayed where you had you been too afraid to leave what no longer fit you. And yes, there are many things that this culture needs to break up with. But first, the heart deserves to be noticed. The bath needs to be drawn. And the promise to care for what aches needs to be present. So each week, we'll invite all of us in our community into a ritual to tend our hearts together. If you have another candle at your home, or if you have a small bowl with stones, if you like to drop stones into kind of our collective water, whatever for you helps mark and pay attention to what should absolutely be taken seriously. So I invite you in this time to light your candle or gather your stones. And wherever you are in this silence, a ritual of noticing, that we might speak the names of those we care for, those we cannot be near, those who have died, and those we love. May our noticing be a commitment, and blessed be the heart that loves and the heart that breaks for a people. May it be so.
Ose Shalom, it's one of my own tunes. On the text, Ose Shalom Bimromav. If you, God, can create order in the heavens, why can't you create order here on earth?
Wednesday was a particularly dreary day this last week. I'm not sure, but somehow it got dimmer and dimmer, colder and colder, and damper as the day went on. Those aren't feelings that I associate with our Arizona home. I'm not sure about you, but by late afternoon, my spirit was sodden and I was chilled to the bone. And the day had definitely rained on whatever parade I had started off with. And then, in the late afternoon, the sun broke through. And the dark turned to light, and the most vivid rainbow graced the sky. It was a joy, an arc of rich red, outrageous orange, yummy yellow, gleeful green, blissful blue, inspiring indigo, and super cool violet.
How about vivacious violet?
Okay, good, thank you. I couldn't come up with any more joyful adjectives. And to top it all off, it was a double rainbow. Sure, there's some kind of scientific explanation for that, but sharing in the wonder of the rainbow, that's not at all what crossed my mind. As I stood in the drizzle and in the joy, I recalled that I'd once read that in Eastern traditions, a double rainbow represents transformation. Now, I've never done this before. We've never done this before. And we've recorded Zoom meetings and crafted webinars. We've exchanged pulpits, and we've met you in our sibling congregations. And this week, I've increasingly met online with my three wise colleagues and dear friends. Thank you. Thank you for that time. But I've never done this world we are living in right now, this social distancing, this postponing of our church activities, this seclusion and isolation that we are choosing as we face a global pandemic. So, as we begin our journey into a global tempest caused by COVID-19, of illness and disorganization and of recession, I don't know. I just don't know what we will need to take with us. It feels, though, that we need to travel light, pack saddlebags rather than minivans, take a few tissues rather than hordes of toilet paper, bring just enough so that our arms are unencumbered, and then we can hold on to one another in this storm. Because more than the stuff, we are going to need one another to weather this and emerge whole. And while I can't imagine exactly what we will need to take with us, I can envision what we will face. Fear, grief, and regret. We will face fear because it's natural and it's healthy and it's sane at this time. Fear for our communities, for our friends and our family, fear for ourselves. And yet, if we let it overcome us, if our reasonable fears become controlling terrors, it will turn our hearts to stone. We will face grief. This is a dire situation for our most vulnerable, those with weakened immune systems, chronic illness and anxiety, and for those of us on the edge of our economic system. And like wind through the dry blades of desert grass, there will be loss among us. And we will grieve and celebrate life And here we must be cautious, for instead of our hearts breaking open, as Reverend Sam spoke about, it's possible for us to get tripped up by grief and fall to despair. And we'll face regret. In this fearful time with deadly consequences, we're not always going to be rational. I know that is a fear in itself for many of you. We are bound to make mistakes. We are called today to a morality unlike anything in any of our lifetimes. And in our fear and terror and in our grief and despair, we will not always be our best selves. But when we see who we have been, we can take responsibility. We can seek restoration, or we can be frozen, immobilized, and ineffective by shame. Now, none of these are feelings that I associate with our Unitarian Universalism, our spiritual home. They are dreary, and they are chilling, and they are severe. And so I'm grateful to Reverend Bethany, Reverend Sam, Reverend Tina, my three clergy companions, for their wisdom in affirming that, yes, we will face these things, and yet there will be more, much more, in the storm we are facing. They have guided me to see that there will be joy. The clouds will break, and the sun will shine again, and like a rainbow splashing across the sky, there will be moments rich, outrageous, yummy, gleeful, blissful, inspiring, super cool, and what was it you said before, Reverend Bethany?
Vivacious.
Vivacious. There will be vivacious moments of joy. Brene Brown, a white social scientist and a wise woman in her own right, says that joy is the most vulnerable emotion that we experience. And I don't normally think of joy that way. But Brene Brown teaches that when we feel joy all too often, we begin to fear what might happen next. We worry that what we hold so dear can be lost. And instead of welcoming the moment, we close off, we shut down in ways that we will only regret later. So in the storm that we face, we will be vulnerable to our fears and to our grief and to our regrets, and we will be vulnerable to our joy. And that vulnerability is what makes our transformation possible. My teacher, Joanna Macy, a white, wise elder who I've heard attends a Unitarian Universalist church with her family, she has shown me the possibility of transformation. In her life and her work, she has embodied transformation, teaching that when we acknowledge and accept our vulnerabilities, then we have the power to transform them. She has taught me that fear becomes trust if I name it, and there is someone else out there listening. She's shown me that grief unmasks my deepest love when I share in mourning with others. She has offered up her deep regrets and her accountability, and then invited me to share mine in order to teach me what dignity truly is. And she has shown me joy. Joy in the common everyday things that leads me to a gratitude for all that there is. And this kind of transformation isn't new to us. It has always been a part of our Unitarian Universalism, but we have never practiced it. We've never practiced our faith this way before. We've never chosen to. And now, as the tempest stirs, We must call one another to be transformed by our faith, because we have the companions and we have the wisdom. And if we travel light, hold together, prepare to be vulnerable in our fear and grief and regret and our joy, we will not only weather the storm, but we believe, that by our shared trust, love, and dignity, we will thrive. May it be so. Because one another took a day, and in all of our days to come.
Please join me now in singing hymn number 100, I've Got Peace Like a River. I've got peace. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got pain. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got tears. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I've got strength. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. I've I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul.
As we come to the end of our time together, of this worship and this drinking at this renewing well together, it's time to take one more drink. And as you take a sip for the road, perhaps these words might prepare you, strengthen you, send you forth into this unknown journey we all face together, in which I'm so blessed to face with other Unitarian Universalists and my wonderful colleagues. When I was quite young in college, a friend of mine was a philosophy student. And one day he announced quite confidently that friendships formed by people living under democracies had to be better and stronger, truer and purer than friendships formed by those who lived under authoritarian rule. That took me aback, and I thought about it. I thought of all the places I'd visited, the 5 years I lived in the Soviet Union as a small child and late teenager, and I disagreed. It's the places with adversity, with trouble, that I have seen people become extremely good friends. Russians, when they trust each other, have each other's back. And if I mention to a Russian who likes me and has me in their house that I like a certain author, the next time I see them, they will give me everything they can find written by that person. When I was a young girl, when I was in kindergarten in Moscow, I met 3 American students when we started kindergarten together. And more than 50 years later, I am still in contact with those 3 students, their parents, and many of their siblings. The bonds we form in difficult places and times, I think, can be strong and rich and good. And in difficult times, so much of the good and strong in us comes out. In her work, A Paradise Built in Hell, The Extraordinary Community Built in Crisis by Rebecca Solnit, she interviews people who've gone through earthquakes and fire and terrible car crashes. And almost to a person, they don't speak right away about the hunger and the cold and the fear and the running out of food. A smile comes over their face, and they talk about the amazing people who come forth, the neighbors who come out to give them food, the strangers in a boat who pluck them off their rooftop in a flood. That's what they remember, and they remember the sacred community that can form in such times. Now, I know we're not supposed to talk about this experience as a snowstorm, but having lived 18 years on and off in Washington, D.C., snowstorms there are quite catastrophic. A little inch of ice can leave school children stranded for 8 hours on buses. And so it's a wonderful time for neighbors to come out, shovel each other's walks, be present to one another. I know you may have been through much worse catastrophes, and some of you have been through other kinds of storms. But I remember one special story that happened to me in the middle of a snowstorm. I love to cross-country ski, and one year in Washington, D.C., I could do it for 10 days straight along an old railroad path turned into a multi-use trail through the woods. And the very first day I went out, and I felt like I was flying on a velvet trail. And I wanted to go on forever. It felt like a taste of heaven, until I remembered that my wool cap didn't have a bill, and I had no sunblock on. And so I stepped off the trail, took off my equipment, walked up to a CVS, put all my equipment up against the store wall, hoping no one would take it. And I walked inside over to the travel section. I pulled out the few coins I had in my windbreaker, and they weren't enough to buy even the smallest tube. But a man came up and tapped me on the shoulder, a complete stranger, and he said, "Are you the cross-country skier?" I thought, yes. And he said, "What do you need?" And I said, "Well, about $2." And he told me his story. He'd broken his leg skiing alone in the woods. So he could never go out and do it again, but he certainly supported the activity. And so he handed me anything for a cross-country skier, the $2 I needed. It's just a simple little gesture, but it felt like a miracle. Complete stranger, saving my day, letting me continue. We've had those moments, haven't we all? Of course, there are times when the worst comes out in us. Of course, there are times when people give in to fear. They look for violence, and so they find it. And Solnit describes what we all know happened after Katrina in New Orleans, how people looked for violence, found it, and often shot unarmed people without a reason. We have a choice. We can choose to grab, hold on to, stand on all those wonderful principles we have. As Unitarian Universalists, we know the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We can choose to remember that. There will be fear, there will be anger, there'll be days we're just royally ticked off. But we can stand on our principles. We've seen already that when we see a possibility of a shortage for toilet paper, we create it, right? So why don't we create, whenever we can, this new possibility, this new way of being that is rich and good and echoes our principles. I have found that in times of trouble, I've made my best friends. So I invite you to do the same, whether it's by phone or by video or by Zoom, do that. And hear these words from Solnit that comfort me so much as you're about to step off onto this new journey. She tells of the warm night of August 15th, 2003, the Milky Way could be seen in New York City, a heavenly realm long lost to view until that blackout that hit the Northeast late that afternoon. You can think of the current social order as something akin to this artificial light, another kind of power that fails in disaster. In its place appears a reversion to improvised, collaborative, cooperative, and local community. However beautiful the stars of a suddenly visible night sky, few nowadays could find their way home by them. But the constellations of solidarity, altruism, and improvisation are within most of us and reappear at these times. And so now, wherever you are, we will extinguish our chalice and prepare to depart.
For the postlude, this is George Knight Gershwin's Our Love Is Here to Stay.
folks, we are so glad you could join us for this worship service of the Baja 4 congregations. Please do follow the directions below to give an offering to whichever congregation you are a part of. This is a practice of weekly gratitude that we continue whatever way we gather. Be well, be safe, stay connected. See you next week.